Thank you, and good morning. Still morning, I hope. I think, was Harry able to make it over today? I didn't look. So I might be, Kevin? All right. There's only a couple of us left standing between you and lunch. So it's an enviable position to be in some regards because I know I'm not expected to talk that long. However, I wanted to address the importance of the research that you do or that is done virtually anywhere in the water business to an agency like ours, and probably as well to Harry. You've heard about groundwater modeling in this conference from municipalities and probably other entities, the use of ground penetrating radar to establish snow water content in the snowpack in the mountains and get a better idea of how much is there. All that type of stuff, that knowledge that can affect how an agency that manages a very basic resource with very important basic data is critical. We've had prior research done in the old WRRI days, stream channel conveyance losses. The agency needs to, and at times employs that type of research to very important effect. Research on consumptive use of diverted water for irrigation is important, and as we get more sophisticated in how that consumptive use is determined, it is only going to be helpful to us that have to manage what our consumptive use allotments are under various decrees and compacts. So that type of research that deals with the basic sciences is crucial to us. It's very interesting to be at national and regional meetings where we continually fight for funding for basic data. Stream flow, snowpack, those are our basic data points. They're not sexy, but they're critical. And then what we can do to understand them better through research only adds to that layer of value. But I want to just focus on a couple of things involving research, and that is if you think about it as you perform your research and it's hopeful that it's going to be valuable to an agency like ours, you have to think a little bit like a bureaucrat. How will the result of this study enable Mr. Tyrrell or Mr. Labonte to do their job better? How will it really ultimately make the use of water easier, more effective, and more valuable for our constituents? So the keys to the research that I see, the value for us, is more on the applied side than on the theoretical side. To the extent theoretical research leads to applied research and leads to applicable results, that's great. But the pure theoretical research does not quite have the value for us that applied research does. That's just because of the nature of our business. It's not any kind of a wave against theoretical research because that has to be done. But what we have to be able to do is take the results of your work and turn it into policy. And when you're going to turn it into policy, you understand that we need to be able to explain that to every water user and every constituent, every permit applicant in the state of Wyoming. So the simpler that research can be applied, the more effective and the more valuable it's going to be. You would benefit, and people that are doing research would benefit essentially to think like a bureaucrat, if you can. If that's the intent of the research, is to make it something useful to my agency or to Harry's or to any number of other natural resource agencies, think as you're writing it up, how can this be simplified and put into practice at the state level or the local level or even the national level? That's really the key. We need simplicity, repeatability, and defendability when you're converting research into policy. And I say simplicity not because you got to dumb it down for us, but I need simplicity in order to make it work. We still, to this day, we've had water laws on our books for 120 plus years. And we still go around the state and educate people on how we regulate the priority system, how you account for water in reservoirs, how regulation works in the field, how do you do a petition. These are things we've done for decades. Imagine the educational effort that's out there for a brand new piece of research that has fundamental value, but it's got to be shared, it's got to be educated and explained. So, like I said, I had 10 minutes. I do want to congratulate everybody in this room who is doing this important research. There will be things come out of here today that we can't imagine 5 years from now. Forecasting. I was talking with Matt Hubler earlier. We are already working with people with NRCS out of Portland on how can we improve forecasting in the Tongue River Basin, because Wyoming and Montana have to come to grips with how do we forecast whether a call is needed, how do we respond to a call across the state line. This is a brand new thing for us. We've had it happen once, and that was the summer of 2015. We had a call across the state line on the Tongue River, and the questions back and forth were, should it have been placed? Should it have been honored? It was both. And then the ratings came and we got out from under it. But if we can figure out how to forecast using ground penetrating radar, airplane flights, anything that becomes economical, and research usually becomes more economical the more it develops, where we can predict when regulation needs to occur and be right every time, that's the goal. We don't want to regulate our people off unnecessarily, and Montana, frankly, doesn't want us to not turn off if they really truly do deserve the water. So you need to be able to forecast accurately and then act on that information. So that is the kind of practical application that research on ground penetrating radar, for example, may lead to. And because of that, I'll be a cheerleader for that and see where it goes. Consumptive use. In the Colorado River Basin, we have a compact that allots to Wyoming for our beneficial use a percentage of the flows available to the upper basin. And that use is calculated, it's for our use, not our diversion, not our storage, and not for our sales. It's for our use. But how do we know how much we're using? Metric. You want to talk about applied research, or research that became applied and is now almost a household term in water managers across the West. It's becoming the routine way of getting a good estimate of consumptive beneficial use off croplands. Satellite imagery. We didn't have that 20 years ago. That's where your research will lead. So I guess in closing, I'll just say when it gets to the point where we can put it into practice, that's where the rubber meets the road in my view. There are going to be many years of theoretical and early research with a few wins and a few losses to get to that point, but I know we will, and I very much appreciate your efforts. Thank you. I'll stay if you have any questions, as long as it's not about our budget. Anybody reading the paper knows it's a tough time for budget. Yeah, Dr. Tyrrell.
Thank you, Pat, for coming. You don't know how important it is that the state engineer comes to this meeting, so we really appreciate that. And you're taking time to come here. I know you have lots of things you can do with your time, so thank you. A question for you, though, is the issue of reliability. So that you have to make predictions on allocation, all the time, because you have all of these users. So how do we transition basic research into applied research to research that is so reliable that you can depend on it for making allocation uses? And can you describe that process just a little bit?
I'll try. Right, here's an example. Right now in the North Platte, we have a forecasting procedure that's in place. If we forecast in February that there's 1.1 million acre feet of available water in the system, including the upcoming snowpack runoff and what we already have in storage, that determines our regulation. That can always get better. And what I find really interesting is that we can get a pretty good idea how much snow we have on the mountain. We're getting a better idea how much soil moisture lies underneath it, to whether there's room to absorb that runoff when it starts. And yet, forecasters, I think the climatological side is really where the problems are, because we did not forecast the rain that this state saw from late April to almost mid-July in March. And by March, we're pretty much peaked out. March and April, we're gonna be peaking out. We're gonna know how much snow we have. So to get to be a perfect predictor, we're gonna have to have, it sounds silly, but you need weathermen that are better than the 5-day forecast. That's hard. You've got a 3-dimensional system out there with all kinds of perturbations that, I have an app that tells me what the weather is gonna be in here, South Dakota, a week before I go pheasant hunting, but I don't pack my wool clothes until I check that app the night before. I mean, that to me, that's the hardest part, not knowing how much snow's on the ground. I think we can get an idea of that. We know how to do that. So much moisture we can get. The weather in the coming month or two after that data is collected is what we can't yet grasp.